The sky so far, but I can't lose it.
+60 Racing Adventures is the iRacing league for drivers, you guessed it, aged 60 years of age or over. An interesting series showing that age is really no hindrance in sim racing, and in fact, this is the best place to be when the real world racing becomes less likely, less possible. +60 Racing Adventures on iRacing is an awesome league and a great community. 32 drivers ready to go for this mid-season round. From Circuit of the Americas, David Haynes and Jake Sperry here on +60 Racing Adventures, with production and replays by Joshua Lee. Getting ready to go for qualifying, Jake. This is such a unique idea for a championship, but it's so perfect.
It really is. This is something that's been going around with us here at RaceSpotTV for a number of years. We're already on season 32 here of our schedule, and you can see where they've been and where we're heading to next. That run, of course, to the Hockenheim, which will be where we see you at the end of the season. But here for mid-season form, it's been circuits which very much have had that long mentality of it, where you've got to try and get the most out of the track, and this is possibly the biggest prime example of it. A circuit of 3/3, if ever there was one, and a circuit which pretty much has been the Vegemite of sim racing. Some love it, some absolutely hate it, and this is the sort of track which you look at, you try and put your stamp down on, and you really need to find 3 different styles of driving to be great at each section of the track.
Yep, so let's take a look at the standings. John Payne leads the way at the moment from Greg Seitz, Paul Stump, Bob Cohen, Gerhardus Jorison, Todd Scholes, Barry Hills, Mike Grandy, Mike McCormick, and Roberto Catalano. So John Payne up top. Greg Seitz has been one of the form drivers to watch and the reigning champion of +60 Racing Adventures as we head into season 32. But one of the changes this season, moving to the Super Formula Light car. Across the 32 seasons of +60 Racing Adventures, it's always been about the junior level open wheelers. To that end, it's moved around from the Pro Mazda to F3 to the Indy Pro 2000. We're over here at the Super Formula Light car now. It's a very recent addition to iRacing, but it seems to race very well and it looks pretty good as well. I've heard mixed reviews on the engine noise though.
I think it's a very interesting car, and I think it just goes to prove here, David, that this is one of the great things about iRacing, is that it is one of the very few, as we focus on John Payne going out then for that flying lap, this is one of the few cars out there that really truly makes iRacing an international brand and an international product. You looked at this and the light about 2-3 years ago, you'd have said no chance. It's absolutely under lock and key, but every single time I look around, and what iRacing is so brilliant at, it's the fact that you've got racing in 5 different continents. It's the fact that you sit down and you look at the cars and it's got a wide, diverse mix of machinery that is out there. And, you know, when you're sitting with the Super Formula Indy Lights, you know, you're looking around at it and you're going, yeah, this is absolutely what you want. Up over the hill, trying to throw it down. And yeah, maybe the engine noise isn't quite what people will be desiring from it. But at the moment, you know, we're still in early phase, and look at how John Payne has to slightly trail brake into the corner, just teetering the car over to the left-hand side through turn 11 and setting up what will be the long overtaking opportunity on this circuit over to turn 12.
10-minute qualifying session. The drivers get 2 laps, so at many racetracks that sees them completing their allocation of 2 flying laps quite early in the 10-minute window. This is a big track here, though, at Circuit of the Americas. It's a new build, it's a very expensive build, and it's a big Grand Prix style track, and these are certainly junior cars, so they have heaps and heaps of room to play with around here. Doesn't stop a few of these corners from feeling pretty tight through this sort of stadium section in the second to third part of the racetrack. There's a few sharp corners like turn 1, like at the far side of the racetrack, but then you do get these really fast flowing bits. You've got those S's for some change of direction, and that's where a car like this will really feel in its element, really feel super nimble.
Yeah, and then in towards that final corner, the Andretti to end the lap. John Payne will be looking to put his time on the board, and a 156.4, I would say, is all right out there at the moment. That's about par for the course, and as you look around, there'll be a large disparity between the drivers just because it is a little bit different out there. It's a longer circuit where there are a lot of areas where that lap time can really evaporate over the course of a lap. Ragnar Wilsloff will go to second fastest, then about half a second adrift, but I was looking at the practice times and they were into the 55s there, but of course they would have the benefit of draft for as they went around, so that'll be worth keeping in mind. Ragnar Wilsloff there in that second position ahead of Greg Garris by about 0.4 of a second, so you're really getting a mix on what these opening laps can do, and this is a circuit which is notoriously tight on the off-track instant points, so qualifying is very much like walking a tightrope here.
Yes, indeed, we watch Team Vikings, Ragnar Wilsloff. He's second on that first qualifying lap. You almost always see drivers go quicker onto their second qualifying lap. So the first one, maybe a little bit of a banker if the second lap impinges those track limits that you talk about in so many places around here, because there's just so many corners. But lap 2 is where you aim to really attack. It's a 28 degrees Celsius racetrack, 20 in the air. Should be plenty of horsepower. Should be reasonable enough grip, about the conditions you might expect from this part of the world, and so the times are going to keep tumbling as we get the second laps in. But Greg Seitz has gone to the top on what I believe is his first flying lap, so that's a shot across the whole field. Greg Seitz knows his way around Circuit of the Americas and he's not here to play.
Well, Greg Seitz is someone who has been racing around here at RaceSpot for over a decade at this point, all the way back in the Skip Barber 2K World Cup era. He was knocking on the door of a few good results there, and that was up against some of the best in the world like Philippe Laibert and co, as John Payne sneaks back across by 0.03 of a second, knowing that he's got no more laps to work with. They only have the maximum of 2 qualifying laps to play with and 10 minutes to go and set them. So when it comes to who's got what, that's going to be important as Wilsloff moves up third fastest there, 0.3 of a second adrift off of the pole time, but it's going to show that these drivers are getting up to speed. Now keep an eye on what Greg Seitz is doing here in that second sector, 23.5 now entering towards that final sector. This is looking decent.
I'm not sure if it's looking dislodged John Payne decent though, because I think he's down 2 of those sectors just by 1/10 to John Payne. There's still so much time to find in the tail end of this lap. Traction right there, carrying the speed through this. It could be 4 apex right-hander. He just keeps going, and then of course you've got 2 more corners to break for and pitch into at the end of the lap here. One of those places where you may have been conservative with your track limits early on, but now you're trying to carry as much speed as possible through there in 4th gear, and then braking for the final corner. And how you pick up the power here could be easy to run wide, could be easy to slide. If you get it right, and John Payne was conservative, Greg Seitz could go all the way to the top, and he will, with a purple final sector. By 0.2 of a second, he's on top at COTA.
Well, 0.2 is all you need. They don't ask you how, they ask you how many. So how many tenths clear are you? Don't ask you how you got there, and he definitely found that final sector to be the one that he was hoping for. There are still drivers who could definitely improve and go quicker. I think Gerhardus Jorgensen is going to be one of those who could go quicker and find a little bit of time, rushing through now turn 19 and heading towards turn 20 to finish off the lap. So this could be something to jump up. I would say if you can get past the likes of Bob Cohen, he'd be happy with that, and he puts a 56.717 down. He should be more than happy with that. That is the second row of the grid, and that is a wonderful qualifying time for his standard.
Although it would be funny if getting pole by a second instead of a tenth let you start further ahead of the rest of the field. That is not how it works. It's if you're on pole, you're on pole, does not matter by how much. Few other drivers left in qualifying with the ability to set a lap time. Like we said, 10-minute session, 2 flying laps. Does see the time. The laps run out before the time does in most occasions. Bill Smitham's out there having, by the looks of things, done 1 lap. Todd Scholl and David Bradley looked like they went out on track but didn't set a lap time. And Greg Seitz is around doing a cool down. So for Bill Smitham to not start 32nd on the grid, he's hoping that this is going to be a valid lap, and he's hoping that, I don't know, it needs to be super competitive, but just to have a lap by the end of qualifying here would certainly be nice.
Yeah, 1 flying lap is all that he's been able to give himself, and missing the apex at turn 19 certainly isn't going to be helping the confidence levels. Now through that final corner, would definitely not want to let iRacing decide where he starts, whether 15th or 16th row, but a 59.6 is good enough for 21st position on the grid, just behind Peter Hallstrom there for position. So that'll be decent for Bill Smitham, and we'll be certainly hoping that over the course of the race that there is going to be maybe a little bit of drama in front, so we'll definitely be looking to charge up through the field.
Yeah, 1 lap jumps him 11 positions on the grid for Bill Smitham, so that's certainly an improvement in the Super Formula Light. And about to run out of time in qualifying and send us to our first of 2 races in 60 plus racing adventures from Circuit of the Americas tonight. We'll take a look at that grid once it's finalized at the end of qualifying. 32 Super Formula Lights ready to buzz, burble and turbocharge into action around America's finest permanent Grand Prix circuit. It's a current Grand Prix circuit, otherwise I'm opening a can of worms. To the grid, Greg Seitz and John Payne, the 2 strongest drivers of this season, on the front row alongside each other for a rolling start. Then Ragnar Wisloff, Gerhardus Jorgensen, 3rd and 4th, Paul Stump and Greg Garris, 5th and 6th on the grid. A little bit more field spread here at COTA than you'd expect from some other tracks. Bob Cohen, Mike McCormick, Russ Addy, Ulf Olsen, John Morgan and Roberto Catalano to the top 12 on the grid. And then Stephen Karkner, Barry Hills, Jack Turner, Mike Grandy, Franz Josef Sturm, Steve O'Malley is in 18th. Next row has Greg Smith and Peter Hallstrom. There's Bill Smitham in 21st. He's going to be alongside Randy Shoemake. Richard Coulomb in 23rd with Douglas Beasley in 24th. Wendell Lowe in 25th, relative newcomer to 60 plus racing adventures. Earl Setzer has been here almost since the beginning. And then Eugene Clark and Bruce Poole in 27th and 28th. Now we get into some potentially unrepresentative lap times and some no lap times here with JC Hay and Gene Moore, 29th and 30th. Todd Scholl and David Bradley, like I said, no lap times. Jake Sperry's onto it. The tiebreaker in a situation like this, even in a league event, is iRating.
Yeah, and of course, that goes to show that even in a league format, it does pay to have yourself a good iRating out there. Now, here are the weather conditions out there. It is in sim time, about 10 to 11. Now, we're running a fixed weather setting, which is something that traditionally isn't run anymore. It used to be the default standard before iRacing's dynamic weather system came into play onto the service. Now, this will mean that the weather will not deviate. It will stick at a 29-degree track temperature with winds not much at all, 3 kilometers an hour, nothing to deal with, and not much humidity either. I would say these are ideal conditions to go out and race, and these drivers absolutely know it.
Unfortunately, 2 knots of wind is not really enough to get that massive Texas flag going that they have around turn 6. It features so iconically in some of the imagery of on-track action here. But for the drivers, they'll favour that consistency, and they won't need to worry about getting too hot from their sim rigs at home. The iRacing weather's not going to affect that. So you're seeing some of the parts of the racetrack where it does feel really tight, other places feel really open, but they've got that section of just switchbacks there where this is one of those circuits where VR or triple monitors become really favoured.
Yeah, this is one of those few circuits that you've got these long corners and you need to see out there in advance, and sometimes that's why you see the triple screens being important. We're seeing a look as well away from the triple screens in the professional scene out there and more towards those wide monitors that they've got, the curved monitors. That seems to be something, really, David, that I'm keeping a good look at, because it's almost the case that, okay, well, you can have it long like that. You've got maybe still the same view, but you're not having to deal with the blind spots in between like halos. As the pace car dives in, pace is behind Greg's seats.
15 laps of Circuit of the Americas ahead of us for race 1 of 60+ racing adventures. The pole sitter is on his way. 32 Super Formula lights heading towards turn 1. Bit of stretch from the field up front. It's almost 3 wide in the middle and pretty densely packed further back. Who's Brave heading towards the tight apex up the top of the hill of turn 1. Well, Mike McCormick is, he's gained a spot. Roberto Catalano featuring in the top 10 of the points. He's Brave, he's gained a spot. Barry Hill's picking up a few as well. Other than that, not too many dramatic changes. No one falling back. No incidents until now. Ulf Olsen on cold tyres through the S's, spears off and into the barrier, taking no one with him.
Yeah, that's completely on his own. I was actually really surprised to see how expansive everyone was through the opening stages, but Ulf Olsen is the first driver out of the race, and with a big smash into the barriers. Not ideal, but look at how they trade here. Greg Garrison, Mike McCormick having looks into turn 11, and you're going to see quite a bit of this here. Drivers trying to work out where the right place to attack is going to be, and you'll see that a lot are going to wait out of 11 to attack through 12. John Morgan is going to be one who's going to try that against Roberto Catalano.
So a few drivers had a look at the far side of the circuit. A few tried to set up their drive onto this long back straight. Roberto Catalano looking to make a second position on this opening lap, now inside of the top 10. Great start from Greg Seitz and John Payne. 1 second gaps out there, but here's Ulf Olsen on the opening lap. It doesn't even look like he does all too much wrong, but he's asked for something that the rear grip couldn't give.
Yeah, just needed a little bit more out there, and of course with these tyres it does take a couple laps to get into the operating window, especially with the conditions out there being sub 30 degrees. It's quick conditions but can be difficult. Look how close Russ Addy was there to Bob Cohen. This going on for 8th and 9th positions as they jam on the brakes through the Andretti and look to attack back up towards Big Red, the opening corner on circuit here at the Circuit of the Americas, and they need to all try and stay within that rubber band limit out there on circuit. We're talking 1.5 seconds. That is the slipstream limit that they're going to find out there. Anything beyond that and it'll become very, very difficult, and that is Wendell Lowe, who is turned around then at the final corner, finds a reverse gear and is going to need to find a way back forward again. Looks like there's no damage, so able to continue on without trouble.
Potentially a spin getting to power, potentially a spin locking up the brakes in some way. John Morgan's also going to go for a little bit of a ride. Multiple time Super 70s champion John Morgan. It's off the road, dropping back through the field. Still on track though, most of those other cars. This is a look at him rejoining again with no damage. That's something that's good about this racetrack. Heaps of paved runoff, heaps of places that you can go for an off-track adventure and be able to recover it without too much damage.
Well, it's good for some of the drivers. It's for some people, they think it takes the challenge away. We'll take another look here at Wendell Lowe on the replay. So I think he just gets a little bit too deep into it there. Very much running up the back of the driver in front. There might have been a slight bit of contact, or what I think is more likely is he really had to jam on the brakes midway through the corner. Of course, that would completely unsettle the balance of the car. Even the lightest amount of trail braking through a corner has to be mastered there, David, and as such having to turn around, and that was pretty much all you wrote from there. So dramatic in the early stages of the race for Wendell Lowe. Continuing on, 6th, 7th, 8th and 9th. Continuing in this battle, Greg Garris trying to run away from this entire group that wants to get through and get through pretty quickly.
Yeah, they're coming up towards the closing point of the lap here. Final corner where we saw that incident earlier, but it really was a case of just getting too close to the car in front, needing to alter and adjust your line in the middle of the corner, which the car didn't react to when the plan wasn't followed, when the corner wasn't pre-planned like that. Up the top of the hill, ludicrous numbers of spectators out here. Everyone loves 60 plus racing adventures. There's nothing to not love about it, and the gap for Greg Garris looking good as he starts to leave Mike McCormick and Bob Cohen behind just a little bit. Roberto Catalano, been one of my drivers to watch here, honestly. Biggest mover inside of the top 10 because your top 10's been so consistent. He has picked off just a couple of spots to the 10th place.
Yeah, he certainly jumped up a couple there from 12th to 10th. There have been some good movement in the field, but nothing dramatic out there. Bill Smitham, probably one of the best up there, has gained 4 spots from 21st to 17th. So the big losers really have been John Morgan and Ulf Olsen. Everyone's been actually very consistent out there and keeping it on terra firma, which I think has been important to how this race is going to be conducted. Once more along this roller coaster style straight, which does bend across to the right ever so slightly as you go around. Bob Cohen staying close, but as they hit the brakes, you can get the sense that Russ Addy has a lot more confidence there, trying to dive on through. Not going for those big crazy moves down on the inside. Remember, we got ourselves a 15-lap race here, so it's not going to be one which you sit down and say, right, they're all going to throw everything early on in this race out the window as we go for it. They're going to sit, they're going to be patient, they're going to wait for the right opportunity to come, and that's what we call in the business experience.
You'd hope for many of our drivers that they've got much experience. It is going to be 15 laps of a 5.5 kilometer circuit, which makes it almost as big as Road America or Bathurst. On board with Russ Addy right now in the 9th position in that slipstream of behind Bob Cohen, in the slipstream behind Mike McCormick. Greg Garris has dropped them just a little bit, so this will be helping Russ Addy here running along in 9th, have that double toe down the back straight here.
Oh, Russ Addy's just had a massive spin at the opener.
I held my breath because I saw that as well. I think it's actually the far end of the race track, or maybe it is the opening part of the lap, but he almost lost his nose cone for a second there as he's been one of those drivers trying to come back through the field.
Yeah, so that's happened at turn 1. I think he's just overcooked it on the brakes. Eyes bigger than the belly. We've seen quite a bit of that as he was trying to get by Bob Cohen out on circuit. Got down the inside and basically got scared through the middle of the corner. So there's the 32 car who's been able to pull away. And now we'll focus on Mike McCormick with no worries about Catalano, who had to dive out of the way of the smoke screen that was put in front of him and able to work on. Do keep in eye as well there, just in the forefront of shot. That was Gerhardus Jorgensen, who will be looking at Paul Stump just behind. This is for 4th and for 5th positions, and for Jorgensen on that last lap, he was 0.2 of a second quicker, so was able to pull the gap up to 0.6, but he's definitely not having as much luck on this lap because Stump is everywhere.
So taking a look at Russ Addy, and there he lost the rear, and he did almost get clipped there through turn 1. Obviously now you're facing traffic, you're in such an impossibility to get going again without finding reverse gear. If you spin clear wide of the racetrack, then you've got all that runoff to play with to get yourself going again. But when you're in a position like that, so vulnerable, so dangerous, and it cost him a lot of time, not because of the spin, but because of the oncoming traffic in this big field of Super Formula Light cars, then he had to find reverse gear rather than driving forward out of it. So battles all through the field, as we're used to finding from 60 plus racing adventures, but as you also come to expect at a high speed circuit in cars that are going to slipstream very powerfully. The lower horsepower open wheelers, they got all these wings and everything on them. They reach a relatively low terminal velocity, and then they slipstream.
Yeah, and with slipstream being so important around this machinery, you've got to just go out and make sure that you are within range of the car in front and then use that slingshot to get that move sorted. What will be quite telling is the speed differences as they hit the straight, because look at how aggressive on the brakes Paul Stump's having to be, getting the turn in through the corner, now looking for the drive off of the exit, and this is going to be the prime place to get it done. Sat at about 0.3 of a second back, back, and Gerhardus Jorsen is going to be at 230 kilometers an hour. You look behind, Paul Stump's already at 245. It's about 5k's difference on the straights difference that you've got. So you're really getting a sense that it could be a lot more, but it's not dramatic enough at the moment to make that move. You've got to be within 2 to 3 tenths of a second to really feel like you can make a pass out there, as it looks like Bob Cohen and Mike McCormick have fallen into troubles.
Yeah, they have. There's been a little bit of drama back there. My. And I was watching the speed trap speeds. There was about 5 kilometers an hour to find in the slipstream. Some damage, some significant damage right here for Bob Cohen, and there's a few other damaged cars out there too. Not how they wanted race one of these 2 races in 60 plus racing adventures to go.
No, absolutely not. And I tell you what, the damage there from Bob Cohen is massive. He's completely rear-ended Mike McCormick in front, as there is Earl Setzer, who is trying to make sure that he can tiptoe his way around. And I think that he's got himself then a lot to try and keep in focus too, down near the back of the field. Now, we do see cars in the pit, so that's Bob Cohen getting that front wing repaired, has been able to drive that car back, and crucially doesn't have the black and orange mechanical flag that would indicate you got to come in and get some damage repaired, the same way that John Morgan has, who sat there in the pits. There is the fast repair. You get 2 of them in this series, so he doesn't really lose too much. He'll just be able to get himself out and going once again.
So back with the on-track action, those are those curbs you don't want to grab too much of, but Russ Addy, he's found a whole heap of it. I don't know if he's permanently damaged his car, but it's going to unsettle you massively, and he's taken a little while to figure out, is the car okay? Because it lurched him up into the air. Those little orange things are so dangerous in a little car like this.
Yeah, those anti-cut curbs are there for a number of reasons. You see anti-cut curbs there to try and protect the surface of the road. Sometimes you see it at national circuits to try and protect the grass for cost-covering measures of having to constantly be replanting grass each and every way. Sometimes they just like to put it there as an extra added challenge to say, please do not cut my chicane. And they are some of the higher curbs that you see out there over the course of the racing world, with good reason, because you have pretty much every racing series under the sun that challenges it, and you've got to keep your eyes pretty much forward, especially in a car that doesn't have much power. You sometimes have a little bit more time to sort of pick where your line is as you dive in through these corners. So we'll see quite a lot of that through the opening sector of the lap, and there you go. That's a mock-up Haas for 9th and 10th position that we've got going on, and that will be Stephen Karkner trying to get through on Mike Grandy in the Haas machine. So the Haas going through the Andretti corner at the moment. I'm sure there's no bad blood there.
And this is a Toyota-powered car, so is that a sign of something to come? Let me just stroke my chin. But it's a good battle unfolding, and we were just, last point on Russ Addy, looks like his car was okay, but he did go for a little ride and lose a chunk of time with these yellow curbs. You need them to define the apex, otherwise you just straight line your way through all of that. It's like, no, this is a section of S's. You've got to take the S's. And so the optimal line is to get really, really close to all of them. Get your front tire to almost kiss through those sections that change of direction. But once you get too close and you're too far over them, absolutely brutal in a really low-sitting, lightweight, small little car like these. Not designed for off-roading, designed for efficient circuit racing and to train up the young drivers. It's not designed for taking rallycross jumps.
No, it really isn't, and you'll definitely feel it through the steering column as you try and make sure that battle, or you don't get yourself in trouble. I tell you what, I am keeping an eye out on the front of this field, because that gap is really fluctuating between Greg Seitz and John Payne out there, but it's not really moving, and I find that fascinating. There is Greg Seitz. He leads by 1.7 seconds, 1.6 at the moment, but it's down sometimes as low as 1.3 over the course of the lap for John Payne. So Payne's really got a sector that works well for him. It's just that the other two don't add up, and as such, the gaps seem to be very consistent. Half a tenth off, but they were running 1:55.9s apiece on those last laps, which is consistently both their fastest laps of the race. Yep,
they're both finding their ultimate pace and their comfort, maybe with the car, maybe with the track as they go. Of course, they start on the cold tyres, but it's not a super cold racetrack. I would have thought they'd be reaching peak grip on the tyres around lap 4 or 5, and from here on, maybe you're managing the overheating on them. But no, they're beginning to really hit their stride as far as race lap times go, and that's the gap between first and second across the last few laps. It has not budged by more than a tenth for 3 laps in a row. Greg Seitz is going to actually start catching a tiny bit of traffic. Not slow cars, if there are any in this race, but mainly damaged cars that have lost about a lap by needing repairs or running through pit lane.
Yeah, and a whole lap is going to be a very tough thing to gather back up again, especially with the short run as we're over the halfway stage of this race. And dealing with traffic's going to be interesting here for Greg Seitz. It's John Morgan, of course, who has been down in the pits for a very long time, having to deal with the tow time of the pits in the fully chrome car out there on circuit. It would be very, very reflective and hot if it was there in the real world. And on top of that, you definitely get to see your own face as you go by. So that's something that Greg Seitz is hoping to not deal with at this moment in time, as we get a little bit of side-by-side action running down the straight. And this will be Franz Josef Sturm, who is going to be battling Steve O'Malley. And O'Malley just about takes the apex away. Franz had to jump on the brakes to try and avoid action.
Yep, a few big stopping zones around here, and that was one of them. You often see drivers get pretty ambitious trying to point for the apex there. Same deal happening, and if you don't get that move cleanly done, you're into this switchback section of corners where the other driver can try to fight back. Puts on a great show for all of the fans in the grandstands in this section of the racetrack, and then another one where you can be tempted to throw your nose down the inside into a closing wedge towards a very tight apex at a tight corner. You've got Todd Scholl, you've got Randy Shoemake, you've got Douglas Beasley. Randy Shoemake maybe trying to work his way up through the field somewhat, but it's the biggest mover of the race, Todd Scholl, there in the 18th position. I think that was one of the drivers who either qualified right at the back or didn't get a qualifying time. But now, with many positions gained throughout race 1, and you can take everything you've learned from race 1, put it towards race 2. You're never short of battles throughout the field in 60-plus racing adventures. I count about 5 or 6 of them taking place at the moment. This is one of them for 5th place between Gerhardus Jorrison and Greg Garris. Big day for the letter G.
Yeah, the letter G there, 3 of the 4 in terms of names they're getting a G, so a 75% G rate at that moment in time, and they'll be hitting about 4.5 Gs down on the brakes in some of the higher machinery out there. I reckon you could hit at least 3.5 Gs there as they go through, and that is the time to the force of gravity that you hit through. So imagine that you sit and you think that, okay, if you get into an accident, for example, you hit the brakes, you could very easily lose a lot of speed very quickly, and as such you get that force that acts upon you and you can very easily lose out. Look at this though, they are trying to trade right now, Paul Stump and co out there trying to go through as Stump's got lap traffic, but Jorrison and Garris, it is Greg Garris who's been doing all of the work to try and pull back and to try and make that move, and at 6 laps to go it's still very much the case that we're not decided on the final spot in the top 5.
Gerhardus Jorrison repping the Anglo-Dutch Racing livery. There is a team's championship in 60-plus racing adventures. Not a compulsory deal, but something that a few of the drivers buy into, and it gives them something to work for if they're not working for the outright win, to try to maximise their team points. Anglo-Dutch Racing have been one of the very competitive teams. Combination Russ Addy, Randy Shoemake also relatively competitive, and I think Greg Seitz has recently looked to join the team's championship as well. But this is one of the places where if you've kept your tyres in good condition, then you can keep making a lot of time through the S's. There, another place on the racetrack where you can experience some pretty high Gs with the quick change of direction, giving you maybe a bit of whiplash in the Texas.
Well, you're hoping that there's going to be no whiplash from these drivers as they hit the side barriers.
I was going to say the Lone Star State or Texas, and I said the Texas, which no one calls it.
Well, everyone says it's the Ohio State when it comes to Ohio State football, and everyone says boo afterwards. So the Texas, it means that I would say not to be confused with any other Texas.
Daniel Ricciardo loves the Longhorns of Texas A&M. That's all you probably know college football way, way, way more than me.
Yeah, Texas A&M. There's a lot of Texas teams, actually. So you've got Texas A&M, you've got Texas Christian University out there. You've got Stephen Karkner and Mike McCormick side. That's not a university. That is a move for position straight down the inside. Mike McCormick got it.
Not a university, but he's taken him to school on that one. McCormick battling to be inside of the top 10. Stephen Karkner just out of it at the moment. Not that inside of the top 10 is that much greater than 11th or 12th, but you'll fight for every position here. About to be 5 laps to go from race 1. Greg Seitz has found a little bit more time over John Payne. Ragnar Wislof's in a little bit of a no man's land for 3rd place. Then you come to Paul Stump in 4th, and he's got to worry about Gerhardus Jorgensen and Greg Garris just behind him. There is the gap amongst the race lead.
And you can really sense that Greg Seitz here is trying to turn the screw. 3/10 on that last lap, but it was gathered back nicely by John Payne. They're back to 1.7 for a moment, now at 1.8. And they can't switch off either these two because Ragnar Wislof is only 2 seconds behind them. So he could, at any given point over the course of this run, pull that gap back into a perspective. Or if they do make a mistake, he can just capitalise on the opportunity. So Ragnar's done a very nice job there in 3rd position, and you take solid points here.
Yeah, absolutely, and you know you can go and try to improve on it in race number 2 as well. So Wislof, this is his view from 3rd place, just trying to be precise. His fastest laps of the race, not quite as quick as the drivers in front of him by about 1/10 and then 2/10, and his last lap slower than 1st and 2nd by just the 3/10. And he faces no real pressure from 4th to take him away from the podium. So at the moment in 3rd, he's just keeping an eye on what happens 1st and 2nd place. And so are we as the race gets into its final little stanza. Is it the tyres going to be overheating and going away from them? How does the balance of the car shift over the run? Can you be consistent and maintain your focus across this 15-lap race?
Well, focus is important because you get to that level where you do reach 60 plus, and sometimes it's all about trying to go through the motions, making sure you're continuing to work the brain cells and getting all those connections working to hit the brakes with the right force, get the right amount of turn in that's needed. And that's sometimes why you see a little bit of pace go away over the course of the years, and we talk about that from a point of your 20s to your 30s. So when you go all the way over to your 60s, you certainly get the sense that there is sometimes that pace drop-off that has to be kept in mind. Todd Scholl is proving that he's having a very nice race at the moment as he continues on. This is 17th and 18th positions, and Todd Scholl started all the way back in 31st position, so he has moved up a grand total of 14 places over the course of this race, and will definitely have that big smile in the mock-up Golf colours as he runs on the straight.
Yep, 31st and 32nd, those were the drivers with no qualifying times. And so Todd Scholl was one of them back there, but he's gone through many, many cars in this field to get to where he is now in that 17th position. And you never say never on picking off a couple more spots here as well. And Smitham's only just up the road from him. And we've seen that the challenge of racing and this racetrack strike at any time. So again, you never say never on picking up a couple more spots towards the end of the race as well. Here's Jack Turner, 12th position, just ahead of Steve O'Malley. That's a battle that we've been keeping our eyes on. It's definitely a battle of a lot of green in this part of the racetrack. Here comes O'Malley looking to the inside. Big braking zone. His rival will know that he's aiming for that apex, but you got to be careful exactly where you brake on such a shallow run in. And Jack Turner's able to swoop around the outside, hold on to 12th position. Would you add a guess with the Jordan livery, Club UK and Ireland, and the name, think maybe Steve O'Malley's from the other side of the Irish Sea?
Difficult one to answer, but Possibly. But Steve O'Malley there trying to dive down through. Now, it's a little early into the corner there, David, and I think that's actually a really good lesson for a lot of drivers to keep in mind. He was shallow in on the entry, turned in slightly too early, and then as such had to massively scrub the speed. He's got all sorts of speed that he can work with. He can definitely make the passes, that's no doubt about. It's just the question of, can he put himself in the right position? Is he being too aggressive to get to the inside? He doesn't need to go that far over to the inside to try and make that move. He only needs to move out a car width and a half over, and he's moving over 4, 5, 6 and trying to use as much of the wide circuit as possible. It's meaning that he's scrubbing more speed than needs be, and that's what's making the move difficult.
Yeah, those corners are already pretty acute, and then you don't use the full width of the racetrack to try to open up the entry. You've got to slow to such a slow speed, almost a stop at those apexes, and then using all of the racetrack. His rival Jack Turner's able to flow more speed through and able to stay ahead for the moment. If this was a hot lapping competition, I reckon Steve O'Malley's got a bit of pace, and this is where they talk about the difference between speed and racecraft. Racecraft is playing that game of chess to put your car, your piece somewhere that your opponent has to respond to, that then puts you into a favourable position to try to pass them. And to the moment, that's not quite happening, despite the really strong pace that Steve O'Malley seems to be showing. 3 laps to go. Greg Seitz crosses the start-finish line in the lead of the race, and behind for positions, they're going to need all of the laps to try to sort it out, especially between Stephen Karkner, Mike McCormick here, and 11th, Karkner picking off a couple of positions as he's gone through this race.
I think the difference at the front has been this. The gap was at 1.6, 1.7 as wide through the penultimate corner they go right now, and that of course is Stephen Karkner trying to hold on here with Mike McCormick trying to recover through the field. But the difference maker at the front has been when Greg Seitz turned on the binders, and I think that is a I will let you go and have that place from Karkner, so Mike McCormick gets a freebie, so no fight there. I think the difference is Greg Seitz has turned up the pace by 2 or 3 tenths of a second, and John Payne hasn't been able to follow it. He's actually lost 2 or 3 tenths of a second, and now keep an eye on that second place, because it was only a second and a half over the line. Ragnar Wisloff might have a great shot of taking second in the final stages.
Yeah, I was keeping an eye on that for a while. Greg Seitz and John Payne were sort of going together, matching lap times up front. Ragnar Wisloff just a tiny bit off them in third, but now John Payne's closer to Wisloff in third than Greg Seitz in the lead. There are your gaps. It says John Payne's 3.5 seconds off the lead, but only 1.3, 1.5 from Ragnar Wisloff. I think as they take different lines through these very tight corners, it's been fluctuating the gaps more than if they were just running in the straight line. Just exactly how it wants to calculate that when one driver takes a tight line, one driver takes a wide line that then gives them a good exit. It's always that kind of compromise you're making through that part of the racetrack, whether you're racing wheel to wheel with someone, whether you're trying to hot lap. So it's going to be the white flag for Greg Seitz, if I'm seeing this correctly. This time around, 5.5 more kilometres. That's what it says. Final lap. There's John Payne, his suspension. He's the size of the rear crash attenuator on these things, man. It's a proboscis.
It is rather huge, and you do get the sense that you've got to be really, really choice in the way that they go through. And this is a development car in the certain sense that you're trying to hone and develop your skills with it. That's what happens when you go up to the likes of Super Formula Proper as you go through. It's a process, and you've got to make sure that you're not getting yourself caught up in the process. And this is effectively the Japanese version of Indy Next that you've got running around right now. And John Payne, who is just about keeping that 1.5 second gap honest at this point, is going to realise that he is going to have to try and speed up a little bit heading in towards turn at number 11. Ragnar's trying to do what he can at this point in time, but this is the prime place to get it done, and he's just on the fringes of the draft. I don't see him dramatically getting himself through without a mistake.
You're hoping that John Payne feels some pressure at a distance here. You're hoping that he's maybe overcooked his tyres. Maybe they're too hot. Maybe they're too slippery, because that's all you can hope for now, is that you just run out your race cleanly and maybe your rivals fall off the road in front of you. You can manifest it, you can hope for it, you can take the opportunity if it falls your way, but you can't make it happen with a banana peel, a red shell, anything like that on the final lap of the race like this. Greg Seitz has been superb, and the reigning champion of 60 plus racing adventures is going to make race 1 look all too easy. He made pole position look not easy, but he's made the racing look so easy. He's led every lap. He'll come out of the final corner towards the checkered flag in the Texas, and he'll take race 1's win.
Yeah, it's a confident finish there for Greg Seitz. He can't really say or do anything more when you start from pole position and you run around at the front the entire race long and not get challenged for that in the 774 machine. I think you just got to sit back and say, great job, you've won the race and you dominated. Still some great battles all the way towards the end of this one, and this is a little bit further back. This is Russ Addy, who has got through on the final lap ahead of Franz Josef Sturm, and Sturm, I think, is going to have to settle with 15th heading through the triple right.
32 drivers started this race. It's a big lap. We've had a bit of field spread, so the tail of the field, not even the tail of the field, the middle of the pack, is going to come through now, battling it out for every position. Russ Addy just managing to stay ahead of Franz Josef Sturm. Good battle to the line in front of them as well. For Jack Turner and Steve O'Malley, boy, did they fight all through this race as well. That's what the drivers come back to 60 plus racing adventures for. Not for the glory or for wins, but for a great racing community, someone to fight with, and you'll always find that, whatever your pace is, in 60 plus racing adventures. Randy Schumacher and Peter Holstrom, 19th and 20th, are going to fight to the line. Bruce Poole and David Bradley, 22nd and 23rd, are going to fight to the line. JC Hay and Richard Coulomb, 24th, 25th. That's what they want. It doesn't need to be for the top 10. It doesn't need to be for fame and glory. It just needs to be for the love of good racing. And if it is for fame and glory in the end, then hey, I guess you take that. So there's Sean Morgan just behind JC Hay and Richard Coulomb taking the checkered flag at Circuit of the Americas. I'm seeing 25 cars on the lead lap from that 132 starters. This is the results of race 1 of 2 of 60 plus racing adventures. Greg Seitz taking the win. He sat at a sort of 1.5 second race lead for a lot of the time there. Ended up expanding it out to 2.6 seconds over John Payne in the end. And Ragnar Wisloff joining them on the podium. You look at these times and you see that the top 3 really in a league of their own in a way. Paul Stump in 4th place, 15 seconds behind. Then Gahardis Jorison, Greg Garris, Roberto Catalano, any positions gained for him. Barry Hills, Mike Grandy, and Stephen Karkner as the top 10. Greg Seitz with the fastest lap of the race on lap 13 with 2 to go. In 11th place was Mike McCormick, and then the battle between Jack Turner and Steve O'Malley. Unstoppable, undecidable. They'll have to take it over to race number 2 if they want to keep that one going. Russ Addy, Franz Josef Sturm, Todd Scholl, Bill Smitham, Greg Smith, Randy Schumacher, Peter Holstrom complete that top 20. Earl Setzer, Bruce Poole, David Bradley, JC Hay, and Richard Coulomb, last driver on the lead lap. We saw incidents, dramas for many of these other drivers. John Morgan tangling wheels with some other cars. Eugene Clark there in 27th. Ulf Olsen, lap 1, far off the racetrack as he struggled to grapple with the cold tyres on the Super Formula Light. Gene Moore 1 lap down. Douglas Beasley 2 laps down. And Bob Cohen and Wendell Lowe had their own little problems across this race. Luckily for them, race 2 is a complete clean slate with its own qualifying session, and they can start from a brand new starting point. We have, by the looks of things, our whole podium standing by. I love to go 3, 2, 1, which means I'm going to be heading first to Ragnar Wisloff, the 3rd position getter. I think you could see that race win on the straights the whole way through, but Greg Seitz, John Payne, they're quick.
Yeah, I think that was a mirage, David. I could see them, you're right, but I couldn't catch them. One thing is, seeing them, another thing is passing.
Losing your mind in the Texas heat, potentially then. It's a real deal Grand Prix track here. It's officially 16 turns, and I think it must feel like 16 turns as well.
I think on iRacing it's 20, no?
I'm looking
Yeah, I
in
think
the
so.
info box here that says 16, but
Okay.
often in Sim and on the store page say different things.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe. Yeah. I don't know. I just, it doesn't matter what the turns
Does
are
it feel
called.
like lots of them?
Lots of them is good. Yes. The problem with this track is that there are so many off tracks. It's very difficult to get a perfect score here. You should ask the two others, if they had any off tracks. I think they will like that question.
You're keeping a close eye on them. All right. Well, congrats on the third place then. You got one more race to go, and what kind of fingers can you cross? What can you manifest? A more favorable Mirage in the Texas heat for race 2?
Yeah, maybe so. Maybe I should ask them to fiddle with the air conditioning a bit and look out the window and not concentrate so hard. Maybe then I have a chance to catch up. But on the other hand, I mean, we were quite evenly paced. I know that Greg probably had a lot in store, but John and I, we seem to be quite well paced. So maybe with a little better qualifying, maybe it can change the result. We'll see.
Best of luck for that race 2, Ragnar.
Thanks, David.
Jake Sperry, second place is going to be yours.
Get out of the way.
There'll be John Payne who'll be here along with me. Now, John, that was a race of two halves for you in the sense that in the first half you were desperately trying to chase along over to Greg Seitz, but ultimately the second half of the race was falling out of that range and then looking back at what Ragnar was trying to do to try and chase you. Talk us through it.
Yeah, Jake, I noticed about halfway through that I wasn't making headway on Greg, and so I noticed I had no incidents, and so this league pays a point to finish with no incidents, so I just tried to run a little safer race. It's so easy to get off tracks here, and I kept a mindful eye on Ragnar.
So you had that mindful eye on what he was able to do. That gap didn't really drop below 1.5 seconds through that final stage of the race. You talk very importantly about that consistency value and keeping it clean. How difficult is it here at COTA to keep those incident points under check? Because I think it's got one of the most stringent penalty rules out there for off-track incidents over the course of an entire race calendar.
Oh, it's darn near impossible. I was shocked at half race when I didn't have one, and so that's when I made that my new goal instead of trying to catch Greg. And going through those S's, what is it, turn 3, 4, 5 or something like that, I've tried cutting. Sometimes I cut those a little too close, and if you hit one of those, you're just off with those little curbs at the apexes. And so that was my biggest fear. I went through there every time pretty cautious because in practice I hit those a lot. So, practice is time to test the limits, but I needed to dial it down here.
You got one more race coming up, and I think that's going to be important. How are you going to look to attack that? Because your qualifying time looked pretty good up until the small improvement of about 0.2 of a second. So how are you going to put your car, your number 2 machine, up there and find that extra couple tenths?
I'll try. I think Greg can dial it up more. He usually is the last to go out, so he knows what he has to do, and I always think he's got more in the tank. So I'll try, but hopefully just qualify toward the front. It's not as critical now since I got a good finish in this race to try to go crazy on this next race, but my whole goal is just to stick with him one lap and try to get away from Ragnar, but I couldn't even stay with him one lap. He can go when he wants to go, and he wanted to put me out of draft, and he did.
Well, we wish you the best of luck then in that next race coming along. Driving the Youngling machine is John Payne there in the number 2 car in position number 2.
Thank you.
Well, there we have it there. That was John Payne joining us, and I believe it'll be back over to David Haynes, who's got our race winner, Greg Seitz.
Well, congratulations on that one, Greg. A shimmering mirage in the Texas sun for your rivals.
Oh, sorry, didn't hear the beginning of your sentence.
Shimmering silver mirage in the Texas sun out front, driving the rest of them delirious in the heat.
Yeah, it was fun. I was kind of marked my pace a little bit because I wanted another no incident race and managed to do that. I think the next race I'll be pushing a little bit harder because I didn't feel like my times were where they should have been. In my practice sessions, I've all run in the low 155s, and I don't know why I was struggling a little bit to get down a little bit down to that level.
And if the incidents and the track limits and all of that are a challenge in racing conditions, surely that provides a bit of a sidewinder, a bit of a question in qualifying as well.
Yeah, you have to be really careful in qualifying, because you don't want to make that slide. Hanging out there.
And so race 2, how do you approach it differently other than just trying to find a little bit more speed? Because I think that's what everyone's going to do race 1 to race 2.
Yeah, I mean, now that I've kind of locked in the points on this race, I think I can be a little more carefree in the next race and have some fun. I probably will still try to qualify well because John has gotten, and both John and Ragnar have gotten really fast. So I can't lounge so much anymore.
A lot of people have problems here at Circuit of the Americas with a few of the really tight corners, the really acute corners to find the apex. What's your racing setup? How's your peripheral vision?
I'm using VR, so I can turn and look to the apex, which I think helps a lot on a track like this. And then some of the lines you take don't necessarily go right through the curb, because you're kind of compromising one turn to set up the next turn. So I think that's kind of one of the keys is to those sections where it gets really tight is you have to kind of compromise a little bit, on the entry turn to pick up a much tighter and faster exit on the next turn.
Well, it's working out for you. Another win your way, and we'll see what race 2 can bring for 60 Plus Racing Adventures, Greg.
Yeah, looking forward to it. We'll see you in the next one.
So Greg Seitz, winner of race 1, joining us. What a fantastic race it was. Battles all through the field, and we get to do it all again for race number 2 in not too long here on RaceSpotTV. Stick with us, myself, Jake Sperry, Joshua Lee, because we'll be bringing you that and seeing what the drivers have learned from race 1 that they can do differently in race 2. 60 Plus Racing Adventures has one more race to come. time for Race 2 from Circuit of the Americas. This is 60 plus racing adventures, the iRacing League for drivers 60 years of age or older. It's gone from strength to strength. It just keeps growing, and that's because more people turn 60 every day. It's also because they put on really great racing for drivers of all skill levels. That was on show in Race 1. David Haynes here with Jake Sperry. Jake, what do we think Race 2 is going to give us?
At the moment, we're probably going to be looking at more of the same. I think this is going to be a really important race too, where you're sitting down, you're trying to put your best foot forward on the board. And for those who got race 1 correct, they're looking at trying to get exactly the same thing going. For those who didn't get race 1 correct, they've got a lot of work to do to put everything that they want correct. So I'm looking at that very, very shiny machine of Greg Seitz, and I'm thinking, well, 55.8 opening lap is something absolutely magical. He's 7/10 clear of the field currently in qualifying, and he could probably go even quicker yet.
That's absolutely possible. So we're 4 minutes, 15 seconds or so remaining in this qualifying session. Same format as race 1. 10 minutes, 2 laps, and of course, track limits can be all deciding. That's why we had a couple of quick drivers without qualifying times or a bit further down the field than they would like, because you just got to be so careful in this short condensed format that you keep it between the white lines, that you don't go whacking any of those yellow anti-cut curbs. You keep your 4 tyres plainly on pavement. John Payne goes through into the second. Bob Cohen goes up into fourth. We're looking at Randy Shoemake. No time yet from him as he negotiates the final corner tidily, giving himself plenty of space as he gets back up to throttle. There's Roberto Catalano jumping to fifth. Randy Shoemake, his time will go in. The question is, does his lap time go in? And here's Greg Seitz. Oh, decent improvement on that final lap, Jake.
Yeah, he's gone up now to a 55.5, and you consider the fastest lap was a 55.7 in that opening race. It is worth noting that the track is down by a degree in terms of temperature, so we are expecting maybe slightly faster lap times. Barry Hill's going 14th quickest with his attempt out there, and Greg, out of both of his laps, goes flying across the chicanes as you possibly would through that section. So definitely to be happy with. Jorison might need to improve. We know how good he is as we focus on Jerry Kerr down in 28th position. Definitely not a representative lap time from him at the moment. No improvement from Jorison in terms of position. JC Hay is there, so Kerr, I think, is the last driver out there. In fact, he's done both of his laps, so I think that's everybody in the books and pretty much out of sight. No one's going to be able to get out in time to get around, do a lap, and then go out and put something on the board again.
Yeah, a few drivers that still had a lap in the bag that we're not going to see, like maybe Bill Smitham or Earl Setzer. But for Jerry Kerr, maybe it's just about figuring out the racetrack. Maybe he's made some adjustments. Maybe he's just trying to see if his vision of the racetrack, because if you're on single monitors, some of these corners are so difficult. And that's why we heard from the race 1 winner, Greg Seitz. VR, no problems for him, but for the drivers who prefer monitors, maybe something to adjust to around here, Circuit of the Americas. So you have a few cars left on track, but the timing totem will not move. Lock in Greg Seitz and John Payne on the front row again. But there's quite a few changes to the grid behind that. Todd Scholl's gone from no qualifying for race 1 to in the top 10 for race 2. And I think Roberto Catalano is going to be pretty pleased with his qualifying effort.
Yeah, I think he'll be quite happy with that top 5 performance. That's something that he'll definitely be smiling about with his 57 flat. So that certainly worked well. And those drivers who are out there, and we know that lap times won't move, and you're probably asking, well, why are they still out there? Why are they still circulating around the track? It's quite simple here. They wanted a little bit of extra practice. Just because you've gone over your quota doesn't mean that you stop qualifying and you stop putting the time in. You get the practice in, you understand what the car is doing in the conditions, and it does give you an extra benefit heading over towards the race.
I paid for the whole 10 minutes. I'm going to use the whole 10 minutes, goes the mantra. Wouldn't be me, though. Greg Seitz, as you said, still out on track. Peter Holstrom, Randy Shoemake also trying to take all of the practice time they can in, trying to get that muscle memory going, warm up for the 15-lap race that's ahead of us.
And just heading over then through the back half of the circuit. I tell you what, there are some drivers who are looking at recoveries, and the two that I'm looking at more than anything else are 7th and 9th out there, Ulf Olsen and John Morgan. Olsen had that spin on lap 1. Morgan was out on lap 2 and has gone 6/10 quicker than his practice time. So John Morgan finding a wonderful qualifying effort.
Yeah, in previous cars, in previous seasons of 60-plus racing adventures, John Morgan would always be a lock for a podium every second week. Maybe he's struggling a little bit with the Super Formula Lights car. That opening lap certainly looked challenging on the tyres for Ulf Olsen, another driver with a shot at redemption. There it is, all of the Circuit of the Americas, 5.5 kilometres of 16 or 20 corners of racetrack, depending on who you ask. but there is no ambiguity about the grid. It's Greg Seitz on pole for the second time, ahead of John Payne, joining him once again on the front row. Ragnar Wisloff starting out of third alongside Bob Cohen for a good bit of team representation there. Roberto Catalano inside of the top 10 and solidly with a 5th place start. Looked to have good race pace, or at least consistency in race 1, and that is a great place to start from if that's what you got in your back pocket. Paul Stump is in 6th position alongside Catalano on that row there. Ulf Olsen, one to watch on lap 1 perhaps, in 7th alongside Mike McCormick. John Morgan and Todd Scholl completing the top 10. Could be a good race coming up for those two drivers. There's Russ Addy in 11th and Franz Josef Stummy in 12th. Greg Garris and Barry Hills 13th and 14th. Next row, Mike Grandy and Stephen Karkner. Gerhardus Jorrison and Bill Smitham 17th and 18th. Jack Turner in the 19th with Eugene Clark 20th position. Peter Holstrom and Earl Setzer, Randy Shoemake and Bruce Poole. Then we have Richard Coulomb and Wendell Lowe, Gene Moore and Jerry Kerr, the last driver with a qualifying time, but we still might see David Bradley and JC Hay potentially. The pace cars rolling for this truncated formation lap. That front row of the grid look ripping, ready and raring to go. Track conditions very, very similar to race 1. I think it's actually 10 minutes earlier in the morning.
Yep, so of course that sun not being as high in the sky by a fraction has meant that there's a degree of difference out there at this moment in time. So they will have that work to do to try and get a little bit more speed into the car. That will mean that they can maybe break a meter later here or there, and there'll be a slight adjustment of their marker board. So some drivers who had maybe been understeering are going to suddenly start hitting apexes a little bit easier and finding that they'll find an extra 1/10, 2/10 of a second as they go through. And that's why it's really important not just to practice when you go out there, but practice the different weather conditions that are out there. For the cars that have rain, of course, practice rain. If you're doing just a sunshine-only series, then it's making sure that you got hot conditions and cold conditions measured down, because it is going to make a massive difference in terms of your time and where you're braking and how much you can turn, because you get massive amounts of understeer on a very hot circuit.
Not going to be a night and day difference, race 1 and race 2. So everything they learned in race 1, hopefully they get to carry across. Pace car in to the pit lane that we only saw used by damaged cars in race 1. The pole sitter, Greg Seitz, John Payne right with him. Look at Ragnar Wisloff in third. He's ready to go, following in the wheel tracks of the pole sitter. And away we go. Green flag for racing. Greg Seitz, John Payne, Ragnar Wisloff as the top 3, heading towards a very acute turn at turn 1, up the top of the hill. Climbing so much elevation, and then on the brakes, Ragnar Wisloff, aggressive early, points to the apex, trying to take second away. 2 lanes, 3 lanes of racing through the tail of the field. Cinematic stuff as they then descend down the other side. Cold tyres heading for the S's. I'm looking at Ulf Olsen, and he doesn't need the extra pressure, but he's through cleanly this time, as is most of the rest of the field, and then they're just going to keep building in confidence, tyre pressure, and memory from here.
Well, that was all nice and clean off the start. There was a little bit of drama at the back as they were getting through. There was a huge checkup and front-to-rear contact between, I believe, Wendell Lowe, Jerry Kerr and JC Hay on the opening. And look out down in towards the hairpin at turn 11. Roberto Catalano looking behind at Paul Stump, trying to throw a big move early. Look at how it checks the field up. Suddenly you've got Todd Scholl, who's looking at John Morgan, and Franz Josef Stum, who's got Russ Addy for a battle.
Mike McCormick's going to have a look. They're all going to have a look at the end of the straight here. Ragnar Wisloff goes for second. Paul Stump goes for 5th. Mike McCormick goes for 7th. But this is this section of corners. It's not done yet. If you haven't sealed the deal on the envelope, John Payne can come right back when the track switches back in the opposite direction. All of this giving Greg Seitz a more comfortable opening lap than I think he's ever enjoyed. He's almost 2 seconds away from the battle for second place. John Payne holding on to that. Ragnar Wisloff not successful as he wanted to keep it clean and make sure he avoided any contact, any off tracks, any lockups. Bob Cohen's right with him in the 4th position there, and then Roberto Catalano has a tiny bit of space to breathe in 5th place. He's run just a tiny bit wide off the penultimate corner, and just like that, lap 1 of 15 in the books. Greg Seitz can tick off one more box in race 2.
Well, a big gap like this is very difficult to pull back, especially on the driver who's been fastest all day long. So John Payne with a lot of work to do is up the hill. Here comes the look. John Morgan, captain, gets himself down the inside, moves past Ulf Olsen for position, and the mid-packs where it's all going on. Look at them trying to cross about there. Likes of Greg Garris trying to recover after what wasn't the greatest qualifying in the world, down in 13th position. He's trying to move up. He was someone who was fighting for the top 10 in race 1, and this is going to be something to keep in mind. Yes, these races aren't long, they're 15 minutes long, but fatigue is going to be an issue because it is 2 races in one night, and they do have that battle to try and navigate.
One of the good things for 60 plus racing adventures is that, well, a lot of guys 60 plus, a lot of racers 60 plus have just a little bit more time on their hands. So we have drivers from all over the US, drivers from Europe. It's a time zone that works well for all of them. Drivers across about half of the world, it's fair to say. Not many 60 plus Australian drivers in this league. There's only one Australian stupid enough to be present. What it does give us is a great variety of drivers. Some of them, it's middle of the day. Some of them, it's definitely approaching the evening. Again, some drivers trying to make some moves in the hairpin corners. And you see Barry Hills gains a spot on Mike Grandy. A few other positions trading hands in the middle of the field. Some drivers who didn't qualify well at a place where it's difficult to qualify try to make up some positions. And there was Wendell Lowe. He had a drama much earlier in the lap at turn 1.
There's been a massive issue for Mike Grandy. He's got a huge amount of air going through the arena section side by side with Barry Hills, and that has meant that Grandy has gone spearing off the circuit over to the right hand side. It's something that's very, very similar to 2021 Hamilton Verstappen over at Monza, in the sense that they just collide wheels. We're just going to get it here right now. Take a look at the air.
Does some serious damage to Grandy as well, because he ends up stuck there in the grass and the gravel in his race. If it's not done, he's going to go to the back from that. So through the stadium section here, go battling side by side. He doesn't want to give too much space to the inside. He leaves just enough. And then the wheels ride up over each other, and he ends up looking at the International Space Station.
Yeah, he goes staring up at the sky, and that's certainly not what he wants to do. Of course, a race car's very good when you can see tarmac. The moment you start seeing more and more blue, you know something's gone horribly wrong out there on track. 3 seconds now to lead at the front of this field, and this group continues here as we focus with Todd Scholl trying to get past Ulf Olsen. This will be for 9th and 10th. Olsen -2 off of the start of this race, with the likes of Russ Addy and Greg Garris looking to try and get into position. And here's the difference maker for Todd Scholl. Will be able to move over to the inside as late as possible at this section, but Olsen is later on the brakes, can carry the speed around the outside and holds that station. Scholl was hoping for an angle to the inside. It's not there. Nothing doing.
Yeah, no Scholl's insert to be found there. That braking zone. Olsen stayed ahead. Russ Addy and Greg Garris are watching on. Olsen runs it a little bit wide with a front lock-up. So easy to do once you need to start turning the steering wheel into some of these corners. You've got to bring the brake pressure off pretty quickly. For him, locked it up, ran a little bit wide, still holds on to that position for now, but a train begins to form, and the longer it bubbles, the more it reduces, the more the action can build. And there's a few battles happening like this. Early going, a great time to make some positions. Qualifying a bit jumbled here at COTA because of those track limits. And now in the racing conditions, some drivers are willing to use a little bit more of the track freely, and others are really trying to walk that tightrope.
It is a tightrope here. Of course, you've got a lot through this opening sector that you've got to be alert through, the lefts and the rights. It's very much modelled on the Magnus Beckett's complex over at Silverstone. And then this second half is a big throw left into the corners, and then you slow it down 120 kilometers an hour for the right, cresting up over the rise, trying to carry as much speed as possible, and then descending down the hill at turn 10, heading over towards turn 11 out on circuit. So Bob Cohen has done what he needs needs to do, but Catalano is going to be quite happy with where he's at. Maybe run slightly wide coming out of 11, and they're not going to have the use of that marker board, which is there, the drag reduction system. No, you got to do it on pure pace, and at the moment it's Catalano getting close, Catalano staying close, but not necessarily close enough to make the lunge.
And then he's rolled the throttle just a little bit, braked a tiny bit early. Should be a good move, you know, if you're not in position to overtake, and just save yourself for another later opportunity. But you do then need to also think, am I inviting Paul Stump to get a little aggressive here? And that's the difficulty when you're the middle car here in a three-way fight. It's not really a fight, but it's three up front. And again, they're proving that Greg Seitz, John Payne, Ragnar Wisloff are looking like the class of the field in the Super Formula Light car, new for this season of 60 Plus Racing Adventures. It's been good action. Catalano, look, he's not afraid of that penultimate corner anymore.
No, he's really not. He is very happy with how he wants to go about it, looking to attack it, but he'll look behind at Paul Stump, who will definitely want to move up into the top 5, looking over to the inside, thinking about it. Very aggressive line to defend by Catalano. It's very counterproductive because he throws it to the inside, and he's got to look at trying to gain on the exit around here. That's his next port of call. How many exits can I gain on to gain the advantage on Bob Cohen in front? And at the moment he's prioritizing quite a bit on entry, which is great if you can make the move, but ultimately it means it's a game of setup. You're always trying to go through it. It looks like Mike McCormick here has had a big issue, and he might have found barrier to go with it.
Don't think it was a massive hit on the barrier, but he did end up a long way off the racetrack, and you never know when you make that contact. Sometimes you have a big hit, you dust yourself off and you're like, how is this car still okay? And then other times, that's locking it up for Paul Stump, you have just a little hit, but it's at the wrong angle, it breaks something and makes the car either damaged or impossible to drive. Paul Stump just finding that his rear tyre temperature was maybe too much, and he's no longer putting that blowtorch behind Roberto Catalano as he tries to battle with Bob Cohen. Puts Stump into a little bit of a no man's land, ahead of John Morgan, North Olsen, Todd Scholl, Russ Addy as the top 10 at the moment. Mike McCormick seems to be carrying on without too much damage, except maybe his heart skipping a beat.
Well, he can't afford that, as here's another look in at turn 12. This is Jack Turner and Stephen Karkner going at it. Karkner on the inside is going to fight back beautifully, entering the arena, and Jack Turner can only sit and watch that one. It was a great move down the inside, but just couldn't seal the deal.
In that a few times, the car on the inside not aggressive because they don't want to create a massive incident there, but then you need to seal that deal before the next corner, otherwise it's not going to be easy to make the overtake happen, and you'll be looking for another opportunity sometime later on. It actually looks like McCormick's going to pit, so more damage than we thought, as he's rolling into pit lane, and there's a big Grand Prix pit lane here. It's not a quick drive through like at some other tracks, I don't know, Alton Park, Brands Hatch, something like that, where you've got some much shorter pit lanes. This is a big boy one, but it's an 80k an hour limit as he's in search of his crew and some repairs, and to get back out into this race, try to make something of it with 10 laps to go. Bob Cohen, what a great race he's had from 4th position here. Sustained all sorts of pressure, still got Roberto Catalano, if anything, a few car lengths further back off him.
Yeah, so Catalano still there, still going through. There is racing for the top 3, mind you, at this point. Greg Seitz now cleared by 5 seconds, but it's again the story of 1.5 between Payne and Wisloff here. Your 1, 2 and 3, still the 1, 2 and 3 at this moment, but Cohen is effectively keeping Catalano at an arm's reach. Catalano can't do much. Little lockup going into turn 12 though for Cohen, and now running through the the arena section of the circuit, Cohen has got what he wants, which is a gap. And Catalano, yes, he can close it up and it extends back out again, but he's not really in what we call striking distance here, which is, are you close enough to impact making a move? Answer's no, so at the moment it's just a tiny bit of pressure.
Yeah, keeping an eye on some of the lap times. Roberto Catalano's last was 0.2 quicker than his official best lap, but didn't count because of the track limits there at the penultimate corner. He's more tidy this time around. then he remains just close enough to be something Bob Cohen needs to look at his relative for, needs to look in his mirrors for. But it might take a little while before he can really try to muscle wheel to wheel, take that position away. And as that happens, Paul Stump caught them by 10th last lap. So he's got all sorts of speed to work with, but just didn't seem confident to try to stick any big moves or get past Roberto Catalano. So give it one lap and he's right back with this.
Yeah, it only takes one lap for this to go awry, and it might just be a case of one missed braking zone spoils the bunch at this point. Catalano struggling over the top of the hill there, where you do get that dirty air effect from what are basic style wings, but you've got a lot of intricacy on that front wing, not necessarily end plate to end plate, but you certainly got a lot of aero that's going through the front wing to generate the downforce compared to what is a very basic rear wing package that you have on this, as 10th place also continues to go up hard to the inside, defending Bob Cohen using all of the circuit here. Catalano very much playing, I'll let you play your game. He'll go to the outside trying to get that angle through, and he'll get drive off the exit as well with the way he's gone. He's got it beautifully sussed. That's a wonderful move, and you've still got Russ Addy dealing with Franz Josef Sturm and as well Greg Garrison. They stay line astern.
Bob Cohen might have snooked himself on that one. How many times have we seen the car on the very tight inside line there needs to almost come to a stop? Car around the outside keeps more momentum. Roberto Catalano, the outside line working so well for him as he moves up into 4th place. I'm seeing more front tyre locking in this race than I remember seeing in race 1. I can't be entirely down to the conditions. Maybe it's the drivers pushing on a little harder with everything they learned from race number 1. Franz Josef Sturm, Greg Garrison pushing on behind Russ Addy in the final sector of the lap to try to get inside of the top 10 in the final race of the night.
Yeah, trying to make all of that progress, and remember there's no more races after this one, so when you sit down and you look at, well, how many points can I get out of it, you're running out of opportunities here. We're into the second half of the race now, lap 8 of 15, and Garris takes a big wide line, just trying something different with Franz Josef Sturm at this point, just trying to get in the mirrors, try and deal with the mindset right now of I need to find a move somewhere out on track, and at the moment not finding it is where it's at the point. So he's hoping for a little bit more of a something to give a little bit of a kick to say, you know what, I can go and get the next position. But at the moment, it seems that they're very evenly matched.
Yeah, and I've seen from some of these lap times that passing is being more difficult than you might imagine with a big racetrack like this with some high speeds and some long straights. Think about Paul Stump here, how long he was behind Bob Cohen and Roberto Catalano, despite what looks like a fastest lap of the race that has him with half a second or more in his back pocket. Now it's only one driver to try to battle. He's going to force to the inside here on Bob Cohen, and then he gets to use all of the racetrack on the exit because he was far enough up down the inside, and he gets ahead with that move at the end of the back straight that others haven't been able to pull off. Great move, Paul Stump to 5th.
Yep, so Stump getting that one sorted, and that comfortable move, all things considered. We've been talking about how important it has been to get it done at turn 12, and I think the big key was he took command of the circuit. He pushed basically Bob Cohen all the way to the curbing on the outside, which is a slightly bit more difficult to brake on as a surface. So he's certainly commanding the circuit well, and those drivers that can command the circuit are those that you really don't want to be going out there and racing, because the moment you start dictating where you have to go and that you have to move to try and get out of the way of other drivers, I think that is a very important port of call just to keep in mind. We have had 3 retirees, so after Mike Grandy and Earl Sester, Jack Turner's out of the race, and finally here comes the move from Greg Garris down the inside, but he's overcooked it. Thank you very much. I'll just sneak on back through down the hill.
Absolute classic turn 1. Greg Garris down the inside, outbrakes himself. Franz Josef Sturm cuts back underneath and defends his position of 11th from Greg Garris, who has tried the outside, he's tried the inside. He can't go through it and he can't go over it, so I'm not sure how Greg Garris is going to pass at turn 1, but he's going to have to find some way there or somewhere else. Look at that, he went to turn into the left-hander, had to steer out of it as he realized his nose was pointing straight But a giant anti-cut curb, that's cost him some momentum, and now he's almost a second behind a driver that he thought he had snookered at turn 1.
Yeah, so there's still more to do, and look at that gap. Look at how it's extended out here for Greg Garris. He's not had the best of opening sectors because, of course, he went through at the right and up the hill, and I think he just got a huge kick of oversteer through that section of circuit. It's very, very tough when you're going through that to try and deal with what's there, and I think a lot of it had to do with battling about, and you often find that the slowdown penalties as well are quite big, especially around this track, so you've got to keep that in mind. This guy, 7.5 seconds, or actually 7.7 seconds to the good at this point. How do you stop someone who just simply can't make mistakes as he takes the wide line through the opening corner?
It's the consistency too, isn't it? So his fastest lap of the race for 55.167 is half a second per lap on what anyone can manage, and then he's done it and repeated it lap after lap, and that's how he's built this margin ahead of John Payne and Ragnar Wisloff, two drivers that seem to have his measure somewhat, even if they couldn't attack him in race 1. They were matching his pace enough. Race 2 doesn't look like it. This is really stamping his authority on the circuit of the Americas, maybe leaving John Payne a little vulnerable to a move from Ragnar Wisloff late on. That's one to keep an eye on. Greg Seitz, this is how much he's maximizing everything. He's even trying to get the toe off the lap traffic.
Yeah. Every single element that you can use to get quicker, you will. And if you've got a car a lap down, well, that's your benefit. You can slipstream onto the back of them and then make the way around. That's not a problem at all. 13th still going on out there at the moment. Barry Hills, who of course had that contact earlier on, has got Bill Smitham behind, who's up 4 spots over the course of this race, and one of the bigger movers throughout the field at this moment. I think the biggest that I can see is +6 at the moment for David Bradley, 29th to 23rd, but Smitham might get a 5th position gained here. He's got a great run here on Barry, who will have to look around, hope that he doesn't find himself in the wrong position. To the left-hand side, to the right-hand side of screen, going to get that done. That is as comfy as you like, throws it down on the apex and gets the move he wants.
Like you pointed it out with one of the other overtakes there, placed perfectly down the inside, not too far to compromise their line, enough that you have your nose in front, that you can get clear of the other driver by the apex and then use all of the road on the exit to get back to power and stay ahead of him. So +5 for Bill Smith, and I concur that David Bradley +6, having started 29th on the grid without a qualifying time, now running in 23rd, the best I can see. No Todd Scholl race 1 heroics from anyone in race 2.
Yeah, so those heroics, I guess, are going to have to be waiting for another time. But here is Todd Scholl and Ulf Olsen, who is down 1 place. He's now looking around thinking, well, I'm going to have to defend this one. Scholl's been staring at his back wing the entire time. He got very aggressive through the middle of the corner, but just had nowhere to go because that car of Ulf Olsen's was just planted on the middle of the apex. Nothing that you can do about that when a driver plants the car in the middle. You just got to do a lot of work to try and pull that back. Now, I am noticing that Greg's lost about 2 seconds over the course of that last lap, so I'm wondering what has happened here. He might have just been stuck behind the lap traffic, which is why he lost that time.
Yeah, sometimes he likes to play with his food a little bit, so to speak, but he also might have lost the time with that traffic if it didn't fall the way he was hoping. And when we last saw him, he was heading down the back straight, and after that you get into a very tough part of the racetrack to make any passes. 5 or 6 corners come up on you quickly, not quite as open as some of the rest. Here's Olsen going defensive, but again, if you go all the way to the inside there, you're in a really rough spot. Todd Scholl's looking around the outside, nose in front, potentially on the superior line here. Can't cut all the way across. Olsen gets the curb and then comes across, spinning around Todd Scholl, both of them making contact, starting with Olsen getting too much of that yellow curb on the apex, sending him out wide, making wheel-to-wheel contact. Scholl will lose out to Russ Addy, who's an opportunist in all of this. And Scholl, will he be able to continue without too much damage?
Well, here's the issue. You get drivers who don't want to yield, and that's the situation that happens when nobody can slow it down. You're going to get contact, and you're going to get pretty hefty contact at that. Russ Addy won't mind it. He'll take what he wants. But here on the replay here, brought to you with us at RaceSpot, you can see down the inside. Now, it'd have been all right if there wasn't a yellow curb there. He would have had the natural grip, but it's because that yellow anti-cut curb is there to stop drivers cutting the inside of the corner. He basically bounces off of it, and there's not much you can do at that point onwards. That is basically just a slam dunk for an accident.
Olsen kind of psyched himself out there because he had enough space on the inside, but he didn't think he did. He tried to take more. He took the apex curb. That pushed him out wide and resulted in the contact. It wouldn't have happened if he'd backed in the amount of space that he'd been given. I don't think Todd Scholl did anything wrong squeezing him unnecessarily there. But that's those yellow curves at these tight corners that make Circuit of the Americas so tricky, and why you do see some drivers being very careful with how much risk they take trying to make overtaking maneuvers. Franz Josef Sturm in 11th, Bill Smitham 12th. Their battle now has Barry Hills and Gerhardus Jorrison, teammates from Anglo-Dutch Racing, lining up on it here as well. So all the way down to the checkered flag of this final race, I think you're going to see some fireworks on track.
Yeah, and as we're ticking down those laps, every single section of this circuit becomes important. How have you mastered one section here or one section there? And the gaps certainly have opened up. Barry Hills looks at Bill Smitham trying to get this one back. Smitham now at +6. Oh, Smitham's over, cooked it by a mile. Can he get it slowed down and stopped before the barriers? He just about avoids it there, and I think he scared himself, missed his braking point, too focused on the car behind. Seeing Gerhardus Jorrison there, Franz Josef Sturm would have seen a ghost going through there. Bill Smitham, how did he keep that out of trouble?
They had an eye on him in front as well, and good work by Franz Josef Sturm and Barry Hills, because he came steaming through like a bullet there. Could have absolutely cleaned up Franz Josef Sturm. We'll take a look at it here. So in behind Franz Josef Sturm, he's looking for his braking marker, and then suddenly, oh, I'm in way too hot. Look at Sturm make a correction there that saves him.
Yep, Sturm had to move out of the way, would have seen a blue blur in his mirror and gone, no, don't want that. But keep an eye out on that second place, because all of a sudden that gap's 7/10 of a second here. Ragnar Wisloff is in range of John Payne for the first time in 2 races. So that's sitting very nicely at this point. The Younglings car there in second position. I think Ragnar here senses that, okay, I'm closer than I have been, but I've still got to get closer.
Yep, here we go. 2 blue machines for second and third, but not difficult to tell apart. This is Ragnar Wisloff in third, almost up to the rev limiter in 6th at the end of the longest straight, and then all the way down in first gear. You've got the paddle sequential gearbox, so you can move up and down them very quickly in a machine like this, but he's using all of them. That's reassuring to see. It drives me insane, some of the race cars that have horrible gear ratios and you don't end up using all of the gears. Looking at you, BMW mainly.
Yeah, the whole point of having gears is that you're supposed to use them. That top gear is meant to be the fastest so you drive in it, but sometimes you get some pretty funky gear ratios where sometimes you can be in 7th gear and flicking between 7th and 8th has itself an ability of, okay, yes, maybe I'll save a little bit of fuel by doing this, or maybe I get more top speed because I bottom out too much in 8th gear. It's very much that sort of mentality where sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't with the gear ratios. But back up the hill again and in through Big Red. Turn at number 1 out on circuit once more. Ragnar Wisloff looks at John Payne. He was on the radio to him a lap ago. There was 1,000th of a second between them. He was saying, you know, there are more things in life more important than the 1 point gain for the bonus out here for having a clean race. He's really desperate to try and reach him and gain that move. The issue that he's got is he's got to reach him, and that's what he's struggling to do.
It says it, top left screen, 2 to go. So there's only single-digit number of opportunities here to try to take that second position away. John Payne sustained really consistent pace and of course got that no incidents in race 1. So I think he's got it in him to look at how far Ragnar Wisloff is behind and not feel pressure. Sometimes, you know, you look at your relative box, you see a car 2 seconds back, 1.9 seconds back, 1.8, and you know they have a chance of catching you. You begin to feel the pressure. John Payne can be assured from his race 1 performance that he can do this. And once you get into that headspace, he might be able to hold on to it. Other positions to be decided in these final 2 laps. Todd Scholl and Greg Garris, 9th and 10th. Franz Josef Sturm, Barry Hills, Gerhardus Jorgensen, 11th, 12th, and 13th. Bill Smitham kind of removed himself from that conversation. Peter Hallstrom is going to battle Randy Shoemake. Richard Coleman, Bruce Poole going to change positions because Bruce Poole has found his way to the wall.
Oh, that's a real shame to hear that. He's found the barriers. There's Bruce Poole. But as John Payne continues on his run, I believe Todd Scholl has his side-by-side issues out there. Look at that gap. 4/10 of a second right now through the final corner. Ragnar Wislov as they head to the white flag, which is being waved by Barney, the flagman. I'll tell you what, Ragnar might have just timed this one really well. If he can get what he wants, it's perfect. Oh, he just clips the curb, and there's nothing you can do. He's a passenger to the accident.
Yeah, causes a whole lot of damage, launches the car up into the air, and then he's out of control sideways, heading towards the barrier where there's big late contact, unfortunately. So Ragnar Wislov throwing everything at it on the final lap. Coming out of the final corner, he was really close to John Payne, but he hasn't been able to keep that up through the rest of this lap. Slim to almost zero chance they catch Greg Seitz. He's built up a very comfortable little race lead on this final lap. So the action is going to be behind him for all of these other places, like 2nd and 3rd, and then elsewhere through the field you see some very close gaps. Down the long back straight, best slipstream opportunity left on the racetrack for Ragnar Wislov, and it doesn't seem like he's close enough. Coming off the preceding corner, you can only hope for a mistake from John Payne now that I just don't think is going to be forthcoming.
It's going to be tough for him to find that move, and he will be relying on a mistake because there's only one straight left, and it's a very short run to the finish line. But at this point, you can see in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, that's the difference maker there. Greg Seitz has simply dominated here today at Circuit of the Americas.
Might be Texan John Payne in 2nd, but Greg Seitz, I think everything's going to look bigger for him in Texas. Pole position for race 1, win in race 1. Pole position for race 2, win in race 2. Barney waves the checkered flag with more vigor than Tim Cook could ever muster, and Greg Seitz will appreciate that as he sweeps Circuit of the Americas.
And that is a great finish. So your 1, 2, and 3 are going to be 1, 2, and 3 here in this race as well. And look at the difference that they've got over the rest of the field. It's going to be 21 seconds, all things considered, between the podium and then the next group along. And it looks like then over the course of the moves that Greg Garris has won out over Todd Scholl. And we got some nice battling here towards the back. Randy Shoemake, who's been doing very well in the closed wheel series over on the ovals with the 60 plus league. He's got Mike McCormick here that he's trying to think on, how do I get around?
Did a really good job of showing the nose. You're hoping for a mistake from your rivals at this point. You're hoping you don't make one. Ulf Olsen's just behind him on that recovery run after too many adventures for him here this round than he would otherwise like. So Holstrom and Mike McCormick not feeling any pressure remaining from Randy Shoemake. He's just got to worry about his braking for the very, very final corner. Ulf Olsen 3 car lengths back, closes into 1 car length. And you're going to need mega drive off the final corner, and he's not going to get it. Olsen spins around before the checkered flag. He's going to go into reverse gear. He's going to finish the race backwards.
That's called the All-American race finish, that. If you can't get it done forwards, you get it done backwards, and he's certainly did manage that very well.
Talk about using all of the gears in racing conditions. Well, just a bit of drama to close out race 2. Greg Seitz, stronger than ever, takes the win, 8.3 seconds ahead of John Payne and Ragnar Wislov, who almost locked horns in the Lone Star State. Wislov just not with enough to stay close to keep attacking, but your top 3 once again have a deep.
Well, believe it or not, I'm 66, and I've done this only for a few years, so there's a lot to learn. So I'm still on a steep learning curve, and I know that my braking is what I need to work on. So I'll keep working on that to get that more consistent and get those braking curves right.
Well, we wish you the best of luck in the future race that you've got. Ragnar Wisloff with back-to-back third-place finishes. Certainly nothing to shake a stick at there, David.
Yep. Very consistent results from everyone on our podium. It's the exact same podium in the same order. Can you be disappointed with second or third? You're much closer to the front than you are to the tail of the field. And once again, in second place for the second time in a row, making it his home. It's the House of Pain. Congrats on the second once again. More pressure this time than the last.
Yeah, tell me about it. Ragnar was putting the heat on it toward the end, and I was pedaling as fast as I could.
I hear that it's new pedals that you're dancing on now as well.
Yeah, I got all new equipment. Everything. I got a rig, pedals, DD wheel, ultra wide. I'm set. I don't have any excuses anymore.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
It's a good thing. I was telling Ragnar, I believe the equipment helps, but practice helps too. And since I spent all this money on this stuff, I'm certainly practicing a lot more to make the wife not tell me, why'd you buy all that crap if you're not going to use it? So, yeah, I'm practicing more too.
Now, one of the key things for 60 Plus Racing Adventures is the community. There's names that have been around for all 32 of these 32 seasons. Yourself and Ragnar Wisloff a little bit newer, but you've raced each other many times before. How important is that when you're racing wheel to wheel in close competition like you did in race 2 here?
It's very important. I mean, I don't want to get into a tussle with anybody, but especially fighting up at the front end. We had a little wheel-to-wheel racing at the beginning of this race, and I think we handled it well. But yeah, I don't want to tussle with anybody. But if he was going to catch me on that last lap, I was going to get my elbows out. Trust me.
Going to give it a bit of a red hot fight. Now, Circuit of the Americas, a track that's closer to your heart than some of the others. Got any experiences with it?
Oh yeah, it's a local track down here in Austin. I've been to the sports car races down there. I've never been to Formula One, but yeah, it's a spectacle. It's very pretty from aerial shots. I don't know how much fun it is to race it. It's so technical and it's hard. It's a hard track.
Well, I hope it's been at least kind enough to you today, and best of luck for the remainder of the season, including we'll be broadcasting the season finale, so hopefully we'll see you there.
You should. Thank you much.
Right, now go get good value out of all of that new rig and pedals.
I'm on it.
John Payne from second place joining us again, and I'm sure you can find your way to the winner, Jake.
I can. Greg Seitz here for the second time in a row. Now, Greg, you've been someone here with us at RaceSpot who's been around for a very, very long time in what we've done, all the way back at the 2K World Cup days over to this point. What is it with you and this affinity for this style of machinery? What is it with the lower-powered open formula cars that you take a shining to?
I don't know. I think it's just I first of all, I love the view. I like an unobstructed view, so I think that helps. Being able and being in VR, looking towards the apex, and it works out really well. I think I just have a style that I learned, as you mentioned, in Skippy, and so kind of my fundamentals were from there, and so I kind of learned that slow in, fast out, and that still works pretty well for the higher downforce cars. The big difference, obviously, is this car has much more grip, much more downforce in the turns, so you can really push it. But it's just a lot about being smooth, and I think again, going back to my past history, I learned a lot, in the Skippy series to really kind of refine my style and get my throttle and brake inputs really smooth, and I think that pays dividends in this car.
So the way that paid dividends for you here today, you really had that ability to say, you know what, first race was having to deal with a little bit of pressure from behind. It was completely different in the story for you. You had 2 seconds by the end of the first lap, and you didn't really have to look backwards.
Yeah, I felt like I didn't have to worry about, I'm always trying to get the maximum points, and we have this 2-race format, so it's the best out of the 2 races. So I got the points I needed from the first race, and I felt like I could kind of just relax and push hard. And, if things didn't go well, it wasn't going to really hurt my points. So I just pushed, and I said in this week I posted my laps and telemetry for everybody to see, and I was thinking it was like a 155.2, and I felt like, and I commented at that point, I felt like, a really great lap would be a 154, and actually pulled that off in the race. So that was my highlight of this race.
Well, when you're trying to find games within a race, so I think you're saying everything that you've got, you need a challenge up there at this moment in time, Greg. But the second half of the season looms for you. Is it going to be a case of everything's going the way you want it, more of the same?
I hope so. I might miss a race or two, so that's going to make it a little tougher to get the championship. But I think we have 2 drop races, and I've missed one so far, so I can afford to do one more. But after that, John and Ragnar, as usual, have been super strong, and John in particular has improved a lot this season. I guess he got some new equipment, and he's found some confidence and consistency. So he's hanging right there with me now, which is I don't think it'll be too long before he's right up with me and challenging me race after race.
Well, we wish you the best of luck over the second half of the season. You've been simply flawless here today. Greg Seitz with us there, David, picking up back-to-back victories to confirm the maximum points haul.
Well, if you just looked at the podiums from race 1 and race 2, you'd think not all that much happened, not all that much of intrigue, but it's always good racing in 60-plus racing adventures. Some great stories throughout the field, like Roberto Catalano improving from race 1 to race 2, finishing in that 4th position, positions gained in both races. And then others through the field, just amazing battling. And that's what they come to 60-plus racing adventures for, is a sense of community. Drivers they know they can race wheel to wheel with week after week. And the next week that you'll see us is at the Hockenheim Ring. It'll be here on RaceSpotTV. Can't wait to see how this season of 60-plus racing adventures with the Super Formula Light pans out. That's December 4th, same time here on RaceSpotTV. I've been David Haynes with Jake Sperry, Josh Lee in the production. We'll see you next time out.